basically we're talking about survival horror games. And they've actually had a huge contribution to game audio, and the way that we like sort of the best advancements come out of survival horror games. So I want to take some time to talk about that and how our horror games have influenced it. So, Eric, like, could you name some of the ways horror games have impacted game audio?
Yeah. I think trying to think of what game genres um, require atmosphere, right? The development of a perfectly realized atmosphere for gameplay purposes. To an extent, we have that with multiplayer games where sound effects in particular are very important, less so on the music because, for instance, in Call of Duty or Battlefield, you need to know if someone is walking up behind you and you want it, like, as a player, you want to be ducking so you're not making as much noise because you're not running through or walking instead of running. You'll make less noise, it'll be less, more quiet. Great. We have, some basic stuff there. But in survival horror games, that atmosphere has to be spot on because it gives you huge clues as to what's going on in the space. And I would say that as with horror movies, the music also needs to be kind of like very closely tied to what's going on and what the player should be feeling in that moment. You have that in most games, but a lot of the fright that comes from games is built up in anticipation, and a lot of that anticipation is driven by music, or in some cases lack thereof. When you realize that there's been no music for a while, and you're like, "What's happening?" Right? There's all of these little tricks that sound designers and composers use in this genre that are fascinating, that are just super critical to that experience. So it's driven a lot of people to push really far in that space. Is there more that I'm
Well, I just add
missing?
that few genre of games need to utilize silence
Yeah,
and just the most minute sounds to create an experience. Most war games or whatever else, they don't utilize sounds in that way. It's more like bombastic, and silence is used sometimes, but usually for dramatic effects. In horror survival games, it's basically we utilize silence to build the atmosphere further, to build tension as necessary, and a lot of that comes with like some of the most impeccable audio design, because when you have no music and no sound, it's just like the sound of you doing things, like the sound of you picking up stuff. Foley art has to be like top notch. The way the game triggers Foley art and the spatial audio around you to sort of lend to the like ambience of where you are is just critical to the experience.
yeah.
Um, do you know? Well, not no. Do you? I guess. What are some of the best examples that you recall uh, from, like, I guess the earliest examples that you recall?
Earliest I would say is probably in the Resident Evil space.
Yeah.
Personally, there are times that I recall being particularly Resident Evil 2, where they really started to nail that experience, and the jump scares where you have to be careful in Resident Evil 2, to my recollection, if there's no music, because one of the moments with a jump scare was totally out of left field and caused the jump scare in part because there was no music. And I thought, like, oh, I guess I'm safe here. There's just no music. It's not telling me to be weirded out. I just have been in this room before. I'm just retracing my steps, blah, blah, blah. Like a zombie dog comes flying through a window or something. Um, that one was a really early one for me, where you realize when you stop and think about it, just how much of that experience is impacted by the sound design and the kind of music design. How about you? Is there some that maybe I haven't mentioned that stick out?
I mean, I know there's PC games that I had never played, like Phantasmagoria and whatnot, but the one
Yeah.
that really stands out to me was like the original Silent Hill.
Yep.
And one of the main
Yep.
mechanics that they used in it was
Ooh.
the enemies would would cause your radio to pick up static.
Yep.
And so one of the tools was like, I have my radio on me, turn on the radio, and as you're moving through this extremely foggy, atmospheric town, you would start hearing the crackle of the radio build louder and louder, and you knew there was an enemy somewhere near you. Now, this is before spatial audio was really a thing, so they couldn't rely on that, but they gave you like the fear of like something near you or around you by using the radio, and by you moving down paths and having the sound build and build, you knew you were like running up into something that you couldn't see. And it was like one of the more amazing and clever audio design features that they kind of had in that game. And I guess more modern. I mean, there's PT, of course, which is amazing.
Oh, right. Yep. Yep.
Alien
Good one.
Isolation was another one, which is a game that is
Yes.
very quiet, extremely quiet. And I think they even got some of the Foley work that had existed from the movies. They had access to the original Alien movie, Ridley Scott's Alien, and they were able to pull Foley from that to use in it. So not only was it like extremely atmospheric, but it had like the same audio design as Ridley Scott's Alien, which was amazing because you're like, this feels like something in that universe.
Yeah. For those who aren't aware, Foley is the creation of sound effects through like whatever means, usually with props that are found around the house or whatever. And you just do like, weird can and paper, right? And you do that, and then warp it in post, and it makes some weird sound effect that is perfect for your situation. So, yeah, it's just the recording sessions that they use for sound effects.
Yeah. Okay. So you seem to have another idea of a game that was interesting. Either because you did this when I started talking.
Oh, it was Silent Hill. You called it out. I went, yep, that was it, because I was literally like, wait, the PlayStation One also had the Silent Hill game where, yeah, you nailed it with the radio and static being like a report, and that when you're in a room and suddenly your radio starts giving off static, like, oh no,
Yeah.
what is coming? Like
Like
you don't have
something's
much
coming.
ammo. Yeah, something's.
Not to mention that just like the sound design that they did for like in Silent Hill 2, which gets significantly more gross than the first one, because there's for those of you who haven't played Silent Hill 2, you should, first of all, because it's probably one of the better examples uh, of narrative design in the game, especially of that era. It was like up there with Eco and whatnot, but the whole thing is a Freudian universe that is created around this man's psychosis because he has like crippling guilt for wanting to murder his wife who's terminally ill, and so everything's like a Freudian like nightmare. So all the enemies you fight are like sexualized nurses and like just legs at times, and but the way the enemies move and sound is horrific. It's just horrific, and because silence is used so effectively in that game, that Foley art has to be impeccable because it's the only thing you're hearing at a lot of times.
Yep.
So
And you get so much of the gameplay from that, right? A lot of what you do hinges upon your ability to understand minutiae in those uh, sounds.
yeah, easily. Do you think there's any other examples or like anything that we can look forward to as we sort of move into this next generation?
I would say that one might even be just the Last of Us games, right? Like those games in particular, they're survival horror. Uh, it, you're in a post-apocalyptic, effectively zombie land, and there are jump scares, and there are some of it takes place out in the light, but most of it is crawling around in sewers or the old abandoned buildings with things that pop out, and you get hints as to what something. There are in fact some enemies where, I mean, there's the clicker, right? You know where a clicker is partially because of the sounds that they make. I mean, there's also visualizations that come for that to help out, but the ability to hear, in particularly Last of Us 2, we've talked about this umpteen times on this channel, but the 3D positional sound was stellar in that game, and really helped with the whole, like, I know where something is behind me. Oh my God, I have to keep moving forward before I turn around because it's going to hit me if I don't.
And actually, it's probably something to mention with Last of Us and Last of Us 2, especially, is that with the audio design that you use, not just the spatial audio, which I think is something that everybody can be really excited about as we move into this next generation, what that means for extremely atmospheric and ambient games. What we saw in The Last of Us is like how audio was used as a mechanic. So like with the clickers, if you made sound, it would change the behavior of the enemies. Likewise, you see in games like Alien Isolation. But the other thing you also caught was the way the clickers would be using their echolocation changed based off of whether or not they were aware of you. And that's not immediately clear to you because there's basically, they don't tell you there's a heightened state for the enemies. But basically there's the clickers that are just like shambling around and nothing's really bothering them, so they're just sort of shambling, and they'll react to stuff periodically, but it doesn't really matter much. And then there's the I'm alerted to something, but I'm not after it yet. And then there's the I know you're there and I'm coming after you state of the clicker. And a lot of that was just given away by like the way you would hear the clicker clicking and trying to hunt you down. It was different based off of the different states that they're in.
Yeah.
So, I'm sort of really excited to see how higher quality games, like a game like Silent Hill that's being published by Sony and developed by Kojima, could really heighten the audio design for those games and 3D audio.
Yeah, and I will say that having played through Death Stranding, that game had excellent audio as well. I don't remember the positional stuff being quite as good. I also played it with surround sound rather than with headphones, so that might have been a factor. I had 5.1, but the quality of the sound effects were good. So Kojima has this in spades. Like he very very understands this aspect of it very well, and as evidenced by PT, if nothing else. I'm excited to see what, if anything, hopefully comes of this.
100%.